thrilled to bring on my next guest. He's a editor and writer at the Spectator US. Freddy Gray, thank you so much for joining the show, sir.
Pleasure. Nice to be with you, Grace.
All right. First, Freddie, let's discuss Daunte Wright's death. In your piece, you yourself say the mistake was terrible and stupid, but you also tie in the media here and how they're assisting in some of the lawlessness of the rioters and the protesters. Can you kind of break down what your thought process is with this?
Well, I mean, I think first and foremost, I think we often get distracted by analyzing these horrible videos of people getting killed. And, you know, in each different case, there are arguments on one side, arguments on another, and they can be difficult things to argue about. But we get hung up on that, and we stop focusing on the fact that it's not appropriate to riot in reaction to anything, really. It's not a legal or sensible thing to do. And for a long time, and certainly in the last year during the Trump presidency, there was this sort of tacit acceptance that it was a reasonable thing for people to be rioting and smashing up neighborhoods in response to systemic injustice. We can argue about systemic injustice till the cows come home, but I think we should be clear, and certainly our American presidents and leaders should be clear, that it's not okay to cause mass lawlessness on the streets. But in the democratic hierarchy and certainly on the media, you do have this sort of slight encouragement, or certainly a sort of giving of emotional succor to protesters who aren't always just protesters, they're often looters. President Biden has said that looting is not excusable, but Kamala Harris has been slightly more vague about it. So I think there is this sort of tendency among the Democratic leadership class to not quite wink, but certainly encourage violence by suggesting that it's understandable.
Yeah, and Freddie, I want to go back to Kamala Harris because one of my favorite lines from your piece, which everyone can read at spectator.us.com, is when you talk about Kamala Harris wants to be the BLM yin to Biden's Democrat mainstream yang. And tell us a little bit about how she is encouraging this a little bit in her own way. We've seen in the past she did this with the bailouts and those kind of things. So talk a little bit here about Kamala.
Well, I do think certainly she's positioning herself as the sort of slightly edgier, more left alternative, but still not quite going full radical, but winking at the sort of radical thing. And I thought her language in her tweet was very telling. She said prayers are not enough, which is a very sort of faux 60s radical line. I think she tries to cultivate this aura around herself as being someone who's fiercely pushing for progress within the administration. And there's almost a sort of tacit sense there that Biden is the one holding her back. And that if you want real justice, you've got to wait for Kamala to come in.
Right. And something that you mentioned that I hadn't noticed specifically before, but I'm sure now after reading your piece I will pick up on, is the rhetoric that is used that excuses this behavior to an extent where people say the city, whatever city it is, whatever city's rioting at the time, the city is on edge or it's understandably emotional. And when the insurrection happened at the Capitol on was it January 6th that happened? January 6th. I remember feeling, Freddie, that I was a little bit nervous to discuss it because I didn't want to appear as a hypocrite because I was a Trump supporter and I felt this like obligation to really obviously condemn what had happened. And then I started thinking about it and I was like, there's nothing difficult about this. What they did was bad and I can say that it was bad. But there does seem to be this tricky situation on the left where they have to excuse it or they have to put this emotional reason behind this irrational behavior.
Well, yes, and it's also self-sustaining. I mean, if you keep telling people that they're on edge, they're going to be on edge. And if the media keeps creating a sort of climate where we think that the Derek Chauvin trial is going to prove whether America is racist or not, it's going to sort of ramp up emotions. And that's why you've already had, before the trial has ended, you've already had this eruption of emotion. And the National Guard has been called in. The National Guard was on standby anyway, just in anticipation of violence around the Chauvin trial. And they've been called in to try and calm things down. But I do think it's this word gaslighting gets used too much, but it is a form of gaslighting of the population to convince the whole city that it's on edge, that it's a tinderbox about to blow. I mean, that's how you create a tinderbox.
Right, and you reference a piece that's going viral today, which I don't have because there were a lot of curses in it, but it's a CNN correspondent, Sarah Sidner, and she's talking to a man, I believe it's in Minneapolis, and she's talking to this man, and he says that the media is, really trying to fan the flames here and create a narrative. And tell us a little bit about that reaction and the reporter/activist reaction to the backlash.
I thought that was almost a beautiful example of how awful some American media is, in that you have this woman from CNN, correspondent, talking to an activist, a rioter, or protester, and she's desperate to signal to him that CNN is on his side, that she wants to listen to you, and what is real, she says at one point, which is a bit of a strange thing to say, and then he keeps replying saying, you're the media, you're going to make us out to be evil, you're part of the awful establishment, and so on. And it's this sort of completely hopeless conversation. And it was a bit like watching a parent, a really bad parent, overindulging a very difficult child. And I think that's the dynamic now between elite media and the protesters. It's sort of, we're here, we hear your pain. And they say, no, go away, you don't understand us.
Yeah, and there does seem to be, I've noticed over the last couple of months, this pushback for the media, and kind of people are starting to see them as part of the problem and fanning a lot of this divisiveness that gets spoken about. And you mentioned the fact, which I think is really interesting, that when this was happening under Donald Trump, it was for several reasons. One, according to the left, America is built on systemic racism, but also two, we had a racist president. Again, I'm just speaking, the viewpoint of some people. And now that Joe Biden's in office, I'm curious how they're going to frame this, because now they have Joe Biden, who's, the unifier in chief, and they have Kamala Harris. So has anything changed, or is everything pretty much the same?
It's pretty much the same, but there's a sort of subtle tweak in the rhetoric. There's more talk about healing now, and the talk about healing comes from the top, comes from the president and the vice president. And so, the real excuse for a lot of the violence last year was, of course these people are reacting because the president of the United States is a racist, and so on. You'd hear a lot of that. Now they can't say that. And so there's this sort of this idea that they're recovering from a wound, and that's the sort of the rhetoric.
Right. And speaking of the rhetoric, though, there does seem to be this desire to only have the narrative that the left wants. And I want to play you a cut here. I'm speaking with Freddy Gray from The Spectator. Everyone should check out his work. He also does podcasts for The Spectator, and they're wonderful. This is Chief Gannon. He called what happened a riot, and listen to the blowback from reporters. This is cut 11.
What was your decision to issue a dispersal order while they were peacefully protesting in front of the police station? What led to you to issue a dispersal order, and then on the back end of that 10-minute dispersal order, then to issue out CO2 canisters and gas for the crowd?
So,
can you talk to us about that?
Just so everybody's clear, I was front and center at the protest, at the riot. We did not.
It was a riot. Don't do that.
There was no riot.
There was. So the officers that were putting themselves in harm's way were being pelted with frozen cans of pop. They were being pelted with concrete blocks. And yes, we had our helmets on and we had other protection gear, but an officer was injured, hit in the head with a brick. That was a Hennepin County deputy. He was transported to the hospital. So.
And Freddie, I've gotten used to the American media kind of, taking something and then adding their little updates or corrections and saying, actually, it wasn't a riot, fact check. But to fact check this guy who was there in real life on camera is kind of amazing.
Well, it's a new level of insanity, and it's one that's got worse, actually, as the riots have sort of continued for the last year. There's been sporadic riots. Is this attempt to say that it's not actually a riot? There was a whole largely peaceful protest thing which became a sort of joke. But it wasn't a joke that went away. It wasn't like everyone said, oh, that was stupid and laughed it off. Now, it's got worse. I mean, anybody suggesting that a riot is a riot is told effectively that they're racist or that they're making up something in order to make headlines. And it again ties into this media dynamic of the more the media tries to placate the mob by saying, oh, no, it's just peaceful, the more the mobs realizes that they have the upper hand over the media and says, you're the biased media, stop portraying us as rioting, even though the media aren't portraying them as rioting.
Yeah, no, the media, if anything, has burning buildings behind them, and they're saying, everything looks good here. Everything is going swimmingly. Freddy Gray, thank you so much for joining the show. Where can people follow you on Twitter and read all of your stuff?
Well, Spectator.us is the Spectator's American website. You can also see an excellent article or two by Grace Curley on there. I'm on Twitter at FreddyGray31.
Thank you so much, Freddie. We hope to have you on the show again soon. Freddie actually has edited a lot of my pieces, so he's definitely has his work cut out for him going through all that grammar and stuff. But he's an excellent guest. Everyone should read his pieces. This one's really, really well done and kind of breaks down how a lot of the narratives involving the riots and looting in Minneapolis aren't adding up with what's actually happening. And we've seen that so many times before. Guys, now before we go to break here, I have one more thing to tell you. Since I was in my early 20s, I've struggled with acid reflux. And it makes sense. It's not one of those things where you go, why do I keep getting this? I mean, at one point I was drinking Diet Coke by the gallon, and then I switched over, and then I started, eating salsa and onions and chocolate, and all those things are triggers for acid reflux and heartburn. So I tried everything. I tried all the quick fixes to make myself feel better. Apple cider vinegar, whatever it is. I would take it because if you've ever had acid reflux, it's so painful and it's just so uncomfortable. But nothing worked. Nothing worked, especially not long term. Until I found Balance 7. It's my one-stop shopping. It helps increase my energy levels. It aids in my digestion. It helps with heartburn and so much more. Check out balance7.com and learn why balancing your body is so important for the performance of your immune system. This is an amazing product. You simply drink a total of 3 ounces a day, and within 72 hours, you'll feel better. You'll have better energy. You'll just feel healthier overall. Order your 1-month supply at balance7.com. Use code word GRACEFREE to save $10 off your first order and get free shipping. Be one of the first 50 to purchase Balance 7 and receive Smooth Skin, an exfoliant and deep cleansing skin conditioner valued at $13.99 for free. If you've struggled with acid reflux like me, or if you just want to feel really great every day, I can tell you that Balance 7 is the product for you. Order now, receive $10 off your first order of a 30-day supply, get free shipping, and a chance to receive Smooth Skin Conditioner for it's a value of $13.99, and you'll get it for free. This is an awesome product. Make sure you check it out. We'll be back on the other side with some of your calls. 844-500-4242. This is The Grace Curley Show.
She's never held office, but she paid the whiskey priest's monthly rent once. She's Grace Curley.